Have you been surprised by the so-called neutrality of the Indian administration led by Narendra Modi?
Not really, because I was I was surprised about it before, but when I went and looked into it, I came to the understanding that this is a general policy of India to be neutral regarding these issues, like across the board. This is their general policy,
But
and
yeah,
they don't make exceptions.
right. But I was sort of thinking that even after seeing such evil, I mean, how they're not sort of expressing publicly that, and how is that going along amongst pro Pahlavi supporters like you, that even they're feigning neutrality?
So I look at the Indian people, and the
Hmm.
Indian people have been very supportive. Like they have been some of the most supportive people when it comes to
Yeah,
revolution. Yes, people have been supportive, but again, it seemed like they have been like the Indian government has had this policy regarding other human rights
conflicts
violations,
too. Yeah,
conflicts, and human rights violations in other places as well. They haven't taken a stance on other things either, unless they had anything to do with Hindus, right? But
right.
usually that's just their policy, because I think they had this policy because they don't want to be dragged into, they want to be, so strategically they think this makes the best sense for India,
Mhm.
because then they could, like, for the national security interests and trade reasons, then they could, if anybody is not playing nice with them, then they could lean towards someone else, right? And if they all of a sudden being disappointing, they could basically change sides as needed. And they think if they basically taking moral positions for or against different countries, they wouldn't have this flexibility. And they think it could serve the Indian people by being able to be this flexible. Like, for example, if they can't buy Iranian oil, they could buy Russian oil. If they can't, sell this to that country, they could all of a sudden, if America is not treating them very well, they could go a little bit more leaning, become even friendlier with China. So they think that
Difficult.
this gives them, yeah, but they think this gives them flexibility, and they have prioritized their national security and trade interests over taking moral positions. So that's their general policy.
Right, and we are perfectly okay with it. I mean, even if Crown Prince Pahlavi comes back to power, they wouldn't be angry with Indian administration that, hey, when we needed
You
you,
would
you
have,
weren't.
I personally can't speak on behalf of the Iranian people, okay?
Hmm.
But I personally think it's ridiculous for us to lose India, which is an economic superpower, as an ally, just
True.
because of this. Like, we have to, instead of holding grudges and
Yeah.
basically keeping scores, what we have to think about is what's in the best interest, security, and economic interest of the Iranian citizens. And holding grudges against India and losing them as an ally of Iran is ridiculous because of that. So I think, like, if we want to make the
Right.
Iranian people more prosperous, India is an important ally to have.
Absolutely. Thank you, Armin, so much. Uh,
Thank
until next time. Goodbye,
you.
everyone.
Okay. Thank you, Abu.
Okay, Jim and Sabina want to respond. I can give you guys 30 seconds each. So, Jim?
Hi there, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Very
Yeah.
good. Armin, you discussed this in your videos very recently. My biggest fear here would be the IRGC actually consolidating power, not just secretly, but formally. And then once they do that, signing a treaty with the Americans to get rid of their uranium for the short term, only to buy time and money to solidify a military dictatorship long term. If such a military dictatorship gets in place of the clerics, how can we continue this revolution successfully?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The thing is that even if you come up with such a deal, I think it's going to delay the successful of the revolution if you actually have a deal between the Americans and the Islamic Republic. But the fight will continue, and the situation is very unstable for the Islamic Republic. So let's look at all the advantages that the Islamic Republic has, and all the weaknesses, and all the advantages that we, the Iranian people, and also the Israelis will have. Because even if Americans become satisfied with a deal with the Islamic Republic, we know that the Iranian people will not stop fighting the Islamic Republic, and we also know that Israelis will not stop fighting the Islamic Republic, right? They, for both of these people, this is like existential. It's not about nuclear, it's about like they need to get rid of the Islamic Republic one way or another, right? And I also think even if America comes up with a deal with the Islamic Republic, they will get dragged back into it at some point, because it just doesn't make sense for the Islamic Republic not to go nuclear, but they have them having no deterrence capability. They will always eventually lean back towards there, and it will drag back United States into it again. But the reason why, even if we delay this outcome, the situation is very unstable for the Islamic Republic, is that doing a deal with the United States means that they will lose their own supporters, right? So they will lose, the regime supporters will turn against the regime, and this regime will only be in power because they could afford suppression. They don't have ideological backing anymore. They don't have people who will die for the regime because they think that this regime represents Islam, right? The only people who will continue to fight for the regime are the people who are getting paid handsomely for it, and that's why they will continue to do that, right? So the IRGC will be rich and they will pay for the suppression. The people will be poor because the economy is collapsing, and this deal will not save it. IRGC being in power, you will still have command economy, you will still have monopolies of major industries within Iran. Then in that situation is that you already have the 95% of anti-regime Iranians fighting against the Islamic Republic, but you will also add to that the pro-regime Iranians who are now not loyal to the regime anymore. Like, I don't see, I can't, I haven't seen anything in history where a tyrant could like rule over close to 0% support, right? And add to that that if the Iranian people at some point think that, okay, it's over, the Americans and Israelis did what they could, but we're still stuck with this regime, I think the conversations regarding how do we get our hands on weapons is going to become a lot more popular. And there's going to be, because what I know based on what happened in the past 47 years, but also what happened in early January, we know that the Iranian people are not going to tolerate living with the Islamic Republic. So if they think it's over and the military operations have stopped, because they're not going to tolerate living under the Islamic Republic, they're going to try to get their hands on weapons. But what do you think, Jim?
I mean, it's difficult either way, whether the regime chooses to continue the war effort and lose all income coming into the country. They're dead that way. But like you're saying, with the other possibility of them taking a treaty to buy time, it's also very, very unstable for them long term. I mean, if I were them, I would try to pull out a trick going way back to the, Prophet Muhammad himself, of trying to placate the people, saying, hey, this could be a treaty of Hudaybiyah type of move where we have peace and stability as a weapon for war later, as Muhammad did in his early days conquering Medina. I would try to spin it that way if I were the IRGC dictator like a Vahidi in that position. But yeah, I mean, regardless, it's a very tight spot to be in. I'm happy they're in it, and we're not in it, and the Iranian people are not in it. But I mean, I still see a slight chance of them still coming out to buy time to then reorganize later.
So here's the thing: these are Shias. Shias don't often look at Muhammad for what to do. They look at Ali and Hussein most of the time, right? And I mean, they do sometimes refer to Muhammad, but they mostly look at what Ali did, what Hussein did. If you're being screwed and you have to bend the knee, what Hassan did. If you're a woman, what Fatima did. But Fatima is mostly for women, right? But for military and battle, it's either Hussein or Ali, or if you're really screwed and you need to somehow find a way to make peace, Hassan, right? And let me see, how could I spin this? The thing is that I can't spin this using religious narrative, because I've already used religious narrative to suggest that I will never do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now coming and using religious narrative to say why we're doing this, like, Well, but we remember that you guys told us that you would never do this. Like, it's too obvious that you guys are just making stuff up as you go. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's.
Right.
I'm glad they're in this position, and the Iranian people aren't. But yeah, I thought there might have been a slight sliver of a chance that they could pull through and delay this and survive. But yeah, it looks pretty clear. It's very, very difficult to do.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, I agree. I'm glad that they are in this tough situation. Yeah. And I just think, like, here's the thing: the regime followers are retarded, but they're not that retarded. Like, they are, I follow them, right? So they believe in all of this religious nonsense. So they're like stupid, and they believe in this victory narratives that have been fed for the past 47 years. But there is a limit. Like, at some point, they could tell that they're being fooled by the regime, and they call it out, right? So I don't think the regime is as flexible as some people think when it comes to convincing their followers that everything is hunky dory.
Nice. Yeah, I'm celebrating while the time lasts, Armin. I mean, seriously, I want you guys to do well, Iran to be free, it being like the old days with the Shah, at least as a transitional figure. I mean, I think this time is very, very near. This is very much your guys' 1989. It's fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Jim. And then this time, actually, 30 seconds. Sabina, please.
Okay, I just wanted to reinforce what Armin said about Prince Pahlavi. He has repeated over and over again that he's not running for office. He doesn't want a title. The title, the prince, was given to him. We really shouldn't have questions about what his program is. It is detailed in the Iran Prosperity Project. There is a literal chart and paragraphs that talk about the transition's government's plans for diplomacy towards every country. I'm sure India is in the chart. I don't know if it's in the paragraphs, but we don't need to question what his plan is. He's been very, very clear, and people just need to read the emergency booklet from the Iran Prosperity Project if you have those sorts of questions. But Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi did have the title Shah and Shah. He's the only one that, he was overthrown. But yeah, just Reza Pahlavi doesn't want to repeat any mistakes of the past.